A very good evening to all our viewers today. Today we have with us a very erudite and a seasoned veteran professional in the space of CSR and sustainability. He has served as a chair of UN Principles for Responsible Investment from 2011 to 2014, has been member of various UN initiatives as well as International Integrated Reporting Group. He has about 25 years of work experience, from which he has also worked with Munich Re. He served as the director of MEAG New York, the asset management company of Munich Re. He has also worked with the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C., and researched for the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation. He has a Ph.D. in economics and master's and law degree and several awards under his belt. So we would all love to welcome Dr. Wolfgang Engshuber, Advisory Council member of World CSR. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you so much, Harsha. It's actually really a pleasure to be with you, and thank you so much for inviting me to your joint group of interaction service, which is, I think, very good. I listened to a few of them on YouTube, and I think I found them very, very interesting and impressive. I have been, since we met about nearly 8 years ago, the first time in India, I have been following you on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and so on. And I'm very impressed by the work you are doing on the CSR field, how your education comes along. And I think it's very important, actually, the work you are doing in this field. I only had the opportunity to visit India for 3 CSR conferences, but I have to say, I was very impressed by your local knowledge, by the interaction, and how the Indian market is and the region is developing in the CSR field. I would hope that we in the old world, meaning in Europe and in the US, can learn more from you about the activities, the enthusiastic approach which you are taking. So I think it's really absolutely great, and it's an honor to be here today. So with this, let me start a little bit about my background, my experience. Then I would give you some thoughts, mainly from an investor point of view, some ideas, and then I'm mainly looking forward for our interaction and to see how I can provide insights to the questions which we are getting or the questions you would have. Sure. I started my journey, as you mentioned already, with the responsible investment. It was in 2006 when the then chairman Kofi Annan invited 20 institutional investors to New York. And he said, he has now founded the Global Compact at the time, and he said, but it's very important the role the investors are playing. And could you, your 20 people, come up with a framework and how we can move forward to achieve this? It was very impressive, I have to say. We met at the United Nations. At the time, it was not renovated, now it's renovated, the main building. We had lunch on the top floor overlooking the Hudson River and the East River. It was beautiful. And then he said, now let's get to work. And we went to the basement, and there we were there mainly locked in for 3 days until we came up with the framework. So then Ban Ki-moon afterwards, he followed the principle. He was very engaged, particularly on the private partnerships, bringing the Global Compact companies, the investors, as well as Energy for All together and to move forward in the approach. I think I attended, just a small anecdote, I attended Rio Plus 20 in 2012, and we had a meeting with Ban Ki-moon, and he asked me and said, well, Wolfgang, so you're representing the investors, and we heard about the companies. What's your feedback as investor? And at that time, I said, well, look, I reached out to a number of investors, and the policy statement from the governments read, we would, if we could, if we encourage, but there was no firm commitment. And I said no investor would invest in such vague formulas. And he took it very serious and said, well, now we have to come back and we have to really focus on deliverables and to be clear. And he heard the message very clear, and we had a perfect dialogue. If I'm looking to your potential audience, which are CSR managers in the region and CSR analysts and so on, I have to say, what frustrates me a little bit is that there is still no integrated report. So we still have annual reports from the companies and we have CSR reports. And I think it would be important that they joined and there is a cohesive strategy which is incorporated in the overall reports. There are some which are out there, but overall the tendency is still to have two reports. So when I think about your people who are potentially preparing these CSR reports, and I have to say, my daughter is also working for a big multinational company, and she's doing the CSR report for this company, so I know a little bit of the background. I would say, who is the audience of these reports? Well, the audience is, my view, the CSR analysts, NGOs like Greenpeace, Foodwatch, Oxfam, you name them, and investors. I would say that actually the NGOs are quite mostly influential, and also the investors look very often to the reports of the NGOs in order to analyze more detail about what's going on in the companies. But let me today talk a little bit more about the investors, since this is my background, and coming back a little bit to the early stages of responsible investment. When we met, as I said, in New York and in the early stages, we had a lot of potential pushback, mainly from US investors, who said, yes, responsible investment is fine, but I have my fiduciary responsibility to maximize risk returns. So I can't give up returns for just doing good. And it took us quite a while to really educate them and to make the point across that there is no contradiction between doing the right thing and maximizing return. In opposite, it's actually they are totally linked, the two of them, and that's the important part. So let me say it in very simple words. And that's kind of what I used in my presentations and so on all the time. So what is an investor looking for? Well, he is looking for risk management. He tries to avoid major risk when he invests in a certain company. Now, many companies who are well managed are also focusing on ESR. I think it's important that they focus on an environmental risk. Think about BP and the oil spill way back. Think about social, the employee involvement, employee relationships. Think about the negative impact which it had on Walmart. Think on corporate governance. Think about the crisis we had with Enron, or in Germany, quite recently, Wirecard, where there was no corporate governance in place, corruption took place, and the investors at the end lost a lot. So therefore, it's important for risk management purpose to focus on ESG as one tool of risk management. The other component, maximum return going forward. How are companies positioned to best take advantage of the challenges going forward? How are they positioned with respect to being climate neutral? How are car companies currently investing into electric car companies? How are they looking for future development instead of just backing their old models and their old ideas about how a company should be? Think about clean energy. How are companies positioned in the field of clean energy? Think about a major theme currently, supply chain. How are companies looking into a solid, prudent supply chain to be stable, to avoid reputational risks? How are companies positioned with respect to consumer trends? Here I'm thinking about water usage, for instance, when you produce jeans, recycling, how you recycle your products. How about organic food? So these are the opportunities going forward, and that's why the investors are looking for this. So therefore, the message is very simple. Everyone understands it, and therefore, message that you have to integrate ESG is rather clear. Now, how are companies are doing it? And I have to say, companies are doing it, investors, asset managers, as well as institutional investors are doing it in different forms, in different phases. They can be interconnected and so on. But let me highlight just the main themes. One is integration into your core portfolio. That's what I have been outlining already. It's important that the investors are in the day-to-day decision are incorporating ESG. In the early stages, and some companies still have it, they have in their investment department 1 or 2 ESG specialists whom they ask sometimes, who write reports. But that's not what I mean. I mean being actively engaged in the day-to-day business in incorporating ESG. That's, as I mentioned, will produce less risk and higher returns because you take advantage of the opportunities which are out there. So this is one approach. Some investors then do the next approach. They are doing screening. They exclude certain industries. They exclude, for instance, tobacco, gambling, and so on. And they are potentially overweighting other industries like trends, like renewables, and so on. So that's screening. The third group does thematic investments. So they would invest in certain industries, in certain themes, like renewable energy, like, for instance, water, and look into various options in what you can do to water supply, and or social, that they look for specifically diversity in the company's management, and so on. So these are theme investments which a lot of companies are doing. The other component which companies are doing is active ownership. Active ownership can be in 2 forms. One is that you actually engage with the management of a company. It's most successful if you actually have a group of investors who engage with a company in order to change their management or influence their management decision when it comes into renewables, potentially social aspects, and also corporate governance. So engagement with the company is a very important tool. And I think a lot of companies really listen to investors once they've come up with a certain group and therefore represent a certain power to really the management of the company. And the other part of active investment, active engagement, is obviously proxy voting, which a lot of companies do. And there is now quite some transparency in proxy voting. So when I look back or look now where the PRI stands, the PRI has now nearly 4,000 signatories with 120 trillion US dollars under management. It represents, roughly speaking, half of the total financial market. There are 600 active individuals involved in day-to-day groups, in working groups, in folding coalitions, and so on. And I would say one of the most important tools that the PRI has is the mandatory reporting. So if you're a member of the PRI, you have to do an annual report. You have to report what you're doing. And it could be, as I highlighted, the various fields of activities, it could be in various activities, but you have to report what you're doing. You don't have to be the master already, but you have to show progress, how you're moving along in your stage. I always, personally, I compare the PRI with a sport event, which is the New York Marathon. At the New York Marathon, you have many, many people participating. Unfortunately, not the year before, and this year it was also limited to Corona. But ideally, you have a huge group participating. And I would change the rules for the New York Marathon if I would look at success. For me, success would be to have first as many participants as possible, and secondly, to take the average time of all participants and to improve the average time year to date. So that's important, and that's what I compare to the investors. You don't need to be absolutely the front runner, but as a total group, you need to improve and move forward. And that's what we are looking for. That's how we define success. So while the PRI had a huge success, how I highlighted it, and it is very important, I would like to address 3 areas where I see challenges going forward. The first area is still, if I talk to CEOs and company leaders, and particularly CFOs, and I ask about how is your interaction with investors on ESG issues? And very often the answer is still, it's very limited. At our annual report conference, when we present our numbers, it's mainly the financial analysts who ask the questions. But we don't get many questions from CSR, and we don't see how they value what we are doing in this field. So the dialogue needs to be improving, and the CSR people need to be more engaged and more interactive with the financial analysts. This has one of the reasons, in my view, that the education still is very much for accountants and so on, is very much number driven, very much financial driven, and CSR needs to be better incorporated in the curriculum of these students. So that's very important to me. The other part which I see as a challenge is the move towards more passive management. Active management has its challenge. It's mostly more expensive than passive management, and a number of active managers have underperformed. So passive management is a prudent way to invest, but it gives you obviously less impact to companies and to have much less influence than when you just invest in an index fund. And the third is, if I look back, the main drivers, institutional monies, were actually pension funds. Out of the founding members of the PRI, mainly state pension funds and huge pension funds in the US. Now there has been a massive shift in the US, but also in Europe, so that the pension funds are no longer managing huge amounts, but actually the pension schemes are in 401k plans where the employee invests, takes the investment decision and takes the investment risk. So therefore, there is less pooling in pension funds and less power in pension funds how to address the challenges. So to me, this move towards more individual investments has its challenge and potentially limits the power of investors going forward. So I think with this, I just thought I give you some ideas about the investment field. I think it would be quite important to have now a dialogue in which areas you are interested in. We can also go into my experience at Munich Re, but I would leave it up to you where you want to take the discussion. I just wanted to give you a snapshot and some ideas where you say, oh, I would be interested here or I would be interested there. So thanks so much, Harsha. I can't hear you.
Thank you so much for the
Okay,
lovely
thanks.
brief and the introduction that you gave. I'm sure most of our viewers would be interested in your work during the UNPR Principles for Responsible Investment tenure. And you joined the board, and then you were also chair of the organization from 2011 to 2014, as mentioned earlier. Can you share your experience and the impact while you were working, and what led to the formation of UNPRI?
Thanks so much. Well, as I mentioned, kind of it was the idea of way back Kofi Annan, who said, how do I bring the private sector closer to the UN goals? And it was the Global Compact, and it was then the PRI. I have to say, when we formed the PRI, we, the 20 people, and we were standing at the New York Stock Exchange ringing the opening bell, we didn't have a clue where this would lead us. So we had an idea, but, well, who would know? Then initially we had a phase which we were kind of like a small startup company. We were a handful employees. We are starting to do the reporting schemes. We are doing our annual conferences. But it was kind of like running a startup company. And over time, we developed our own core structure, the board, how it's structured, how it's implemented, and so on. And I would say during my tenure, it was mainly introduction to the world. I was traveling all over the places. I was holding my speeches, trying to convince people. And I have to say, maybe as a small anecdote, it was quite interesting because at these conferences, and that's still true now, is you have those conferences where you have the CSR members, where you have the responsible investment managers. Well, you don't need to convince them. So you can share your thoughts and how to become better, but the more important part is how to reach out to those who are not convinced yet, how to bring them on board. And I always used one when I had an audience of bankers and they were not so much in the responsibility field. I tried to reach them on a very emotional level. I said, how is it when you come home at night and your child is asking you, Daddy, what did you do today? And you have to think hard and saying, well, I was moving money from A to B and I made some arbitrage in between. And I said, your child wouldn't be happy about this answer. So they want to know what value did you create? What was the purpose of you doing in your job? So this kind of had in a lot of people kind of a wake-up call and thinking, let me think about this. So these are things where you have to reach out and convince those who are not on board yet. So that's the important part. And that's what I try to do. And I would say kind of during my tenure, we had a huge success in building up the infrastructure. Many of the signatories came on board. And as I said now, since it's on the journey, it has been even extended much further than I ever thought so.
Yes, indeed, 4,000 signatories, it's quite a milestone for you all to achieve. So moving on to my next question. In today's date, responsible investments have become of prime importance, especially ESG, which could be followed by SDG bonds as well. The indicators of each are mostly self-defined by the investors or the rating agencies, thus lacking the standardization. What is your thought on the same?
Yes, you're absolutely right. that a standardization is lacking. But as I said, it's important that it's a journey and everyone has to find its way. And through the PRI and through the various working groups, there are kind of developing areas of what is best practice in a certain field, how you do this best. And so it's developing, it needs to be much more promoted, but it's coming along, I would very much so say. On the other hand, I think it's important, and that's where the PRI and the reporting comes into play. What is your journey? How do you want to achieve it? And what are the steps you are doing? And there the companies might be very different, depending where they are in their phases. And to me, it's important that everyone has the right path, has a certain goal where they want to be, and to have a clear way to achieve it, and to reach out to other parties and find it and find the best way to do it. But there is no, I would say, if you're climbing a mountain, there are different ways to go up there. It's important that you have the same goal, but you don't have to be on the same path, everyone.
I totally reckon with you, sir. So, sir, according to you, which company is ideal to follow with respect to CSR and sustainability?
That's a tough one because I would say if you dig deeper, you always find pros and cons, and it's a very complex area. If I would have one company and one leader, actually it's Unilever and it's Paul Polman. I think Paul Polman has been so active in this field. He's now retired, retired in 18, but is still very much involved. But he has such a great vision for Unilever. Now, Unilever, with all the products, nearly touches everyone on the planet. And the way he was running the company, he got a lot of pressure because people saying, you're focusing too much on CSR. You need to focus on profit. And he said, more or less, I don't care about short-term profit on my 3 months return. I care about a long-term vision. And he delivered. And Unilever did very well over the medium term, but he wasn't pressed down by quarterly results. And the way he managed the company with his vision, I think is really outstanding. So for me, that's the master child, but there are different ones as well.
I agree with you, sir. Though I would say many companies, even the largest multinationals, have their drawbacks,
Yes.
and they are still not providing any solution to circular economy. If I may also add the name of the company that you mentioned, because it's a long way to go. So, what are the reasons for even Unilever to achieve circular economy, and how could it be changed since they are the leaders and everybody follows multinationals like them? So even from MSME to the largest company, how can they work towards achieving circular economy together?
Yes, you're absolutely, I totally agree with your assessment. I believe it needs to be a combination between public and private. I think there needs to be a certain framework also from the government side, from the governments, to see how to encourage it. Because if you think about waste management, well, if you start that you're charging already a premium on the product which a company is producing, in order to address that at a certain point, it will become waste, and how to address it. So if you have this at the front end, then much more you encourage the companies to find solution on the back end as well. If you don't have it, it's much more difficult potentially for companies, particularly in the beginning, if there is a cost involved in recycling, in waste management, if the cost upfront is not taken care of. So I think it's kind of a combination. It needs to be the legal framework, and then very much the companies have to live up to it, but also It's not only the companies, it's also kind of the consumer who has to play their role. I was seeing the other day the report about Nike. And Nike comes across very well and saying, well, we recycle all our shoes and you can bring them back to the stores and great, and we do waste management and so on. So it's a big theme for Nike. Well, the report was that 80% of the shoes from Nike in Germany and in Europe who are recycled are new shoes, 80%. These are shoes which were ordered by Amazon and were sent back. There's nothing wrong with the shoe, but it's too expensive to bring the shoe again into the circle. It's easier to recycle. Also for the stores, they come up every time with new brands and kind of new label, kind of a new color on the shoe and whatever. So therefore, it's not worthwhile to actually reuse the shoe, which is absolutely new, but it's easier to recycle and make carpets out of it. 80%. So to me, it's mind-boggling, and if I'm thinking what's partly wrong, well, partly is wrong, obviously, the consumer, who always wants to buy the latest, the newest, and, well, sorry,
Yes,
no
sir.
clear answer, but I wish I would have an answer.
I'm sure in times to come we all will have a proper answer to this. So, so you're also working on sustainable energy. In the recent COP26, India declined to ban coal production. Your take on this, and what should be the steps as a nation and corporate for the nation as well as the corporations that we should take? And I'm sure there are a few other countries who followed our path.
Yes, you are absolutely right. Again, I would say it's easy to address India or some other countries and put them into a corner and saying, well, you're not exiting coal and so on. In my view, again, it's a journey. You have to make prudent steps how in the long term you exit the coal industry, and you have to have a clear way and a clear steps how to do it. If I'm thinking about Germany, my home country, it's horrible. They have been on these issues now for decades. They're announcing we will exit the coal industry. They're not doing it. They are now using coal, which is by far less efficient, which is the brown coal. They're still subsidizing the coal industry, and they don't have a plan, not at all, how to address the social impacts, what to do with the coal workers, how to retrain them, what kind of, how to use this workforce. So while they're saying, yes, we will exit, and obviously they're much more advanced in their way than other countries, but there has been a clear lack. So therefore, I would say if India is earlier on in the stage, but they have a clear plan, it's much more better than what some other countries are doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. My last but not the least question, IICSR is a dedicated institution for training, implementation, and advisory for responsible business leadership. What courses do you think we should conduct, and any advice for our participants to have the most impact going forward?
It's a very difficult one because I don't know exactly how I think I know how you conduct your courses, but let me see where I am seeing what is the most important part is not specific subjects. It's the overall thinking. It's the integrated thinking and how to bring the various things together. So for me, it would be quite important, for instance, to set the task of a certain goal and to say within a company, which areas of the company can now contribute to achieve these goals and how can they work together to achieving this goal. So If I'm thinking at Munich Re America, way back we were thinking about how to reduce our carbon footprint. Now what we did is on various aspects, and we involved the employees. So one was, for instance, in America, most people, and like American Re, they're a little bit on the outside, use their car to come to office. So we have huge parking lots. So what did we do? Well, we covered the parking lot with solar. The solar was in New Jersey. You can feed it in. Actually, so we used it for our company. It was absolutely efficient. Plus, we received so much money from the feed-in, so that it was actually a profit maker. The employees were very happy because they didn't have to walk in the rain or in the sun to the office. So it was all covered. So we got so positive feedback from the employees, and they spread it. And then over time, a number of companies in our area did the same. So I think a very nice effect. Then public transportation in our area, well, there was a bus which is running, and it was a pretty lousy bus stop at maybe in the middle of a field. So what we did, we built a nice bus stop. We covered it. Now people said, oh, it's much nicer now. I don't have to stand in the rain. I don't have to stand in the heat. It's nice. So suddenly the usage of public transportation was building up drastically. Then we said, well, we try to promote car sharing. So what we did is we blocked part of our parking lot, the more premier parking spots close to the office, and said, if you have a plate in your car saying that you are doing car sharing, that you offer car sharing, you can get this parking space. So again, it was very much, employees loved it, and it was an easy way. And a number of these ideas came through really the employees who said, well, what about this? What about this? So therefore, my answer is kind of try to involve as many and be incorporative and be cross-divisional. So don't have, and I don't know how you do this the best in a course, but how to achieve this way of thinking that you listen to others, you try to incorporate this and to build incentives. And like in my case with the parking lot and the solar panels, actually they can become a profitable business.
Yeah.
So therefore it would be, in my view, cross-divisional, not very detailed in one specific subject, but really how to achieve together certain goals. Another thing which is another experience from myself is how a decision making is achieved in a company and what are potentially flaws in it, and how to install devil advocates in a company in the decision making process. I use as an example acquisitions. In Munich Re, I was involved in a number of acquisitions which we did. And I have to see there is one flaw which was in each case. The flaw is very simple. So there is a company which is up for sale. So the owner makes this company look very pretty. The pride needs to be very, very pretty. So they show all the positives and so on of this potentially target. Within the potential buyer, there is a certain area who has an interest in buying this company because it's whatever division in the company has this interest. So again, they have the tendency to say, well, that's great. We will have these kind of synergy effects. We will have this, we will have this. So again, only or mainly the positive thinking. So you have two sides where everyone presents it in the best positive way. And that's not reality. So you have to have somebody in the process who says, I'm the guy who plays devil advocate. And I'm challenging now this assumption, I'm challenging this, and so on. So this is again in the process, that in the process of a company that you install this type of devil advocate.
Thank you so much. It's very insightful and yes, practical application of sustainability and CSR within your company is something that we would integrate, focused on which departments they could be looking forward for. On this note, we have few questions from our fellow panelists. May I invite Sandeep to ask his question, please?
Yeah, perfect.
Good evening, sir. It was a pleasure to hear you.
Good evening.
So I was Googling you up to look at your vast body of work across domains. And there was one thing that got my attention in particular, and that was a term called integrated reporting. I would just love to understand that a little bit more with context to an example. How does it operate in real time? Thank you.
Well, there is the Integrated Reporting Group, which was founded in 2010, actually by Prince Charles, interesting enough. And there are accountants, companies, people like I am as the chair of the PRI are representing, and they come up with, have developed a framework in saying what is material for a company and have this all in one report. So not only the financial report, but think about if you have more environmental risks, if you have employees as one of the stakeholders, how does this all come together and how is this, when you represent your company, shown up in one integrated report? There has been now a framework and a clear guidance how to do this, but I would say the application, the practical, is still very limited, unfortunately, and people are still using more the traditional standard reports. And that's where my comment earlier comes into play as well. If you, as a financial analyst, if you are still trained to be a CFA in mainly analyzing numbers, then you're looking for in an annual report just the numbers. And you're not looking for kind of other guidance, which is important to the company and which is at the end responsible, also important for the financial result of the company, but that's not what you're trained for. So therefore it comes into various steps. I think it's the right approach, but the application, the kind of how it's used is still lacking, I have to say, unfortunately.
Thank you. That's great food for thought. Thank you for answering that.
Thank you, Sandeep. May I request Mr. Sushil Kumar Sharma to ask his question, sir?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
In fact, parallelly, I was occupied in other assignment, so I apologize for joining a bit late. But,
No problem.
But the details and the rich experience you bring along with is really enlightening and enriching we all across globe, not only here in India. I will just like to, sir, listen from you about just concluded COP26 and more so its relevance to countries like India.
Sorry, the last sentence, can you just repeat it? It was a little bit.
Sir, I'm saying that COP26 has just concluded last month. I will like to listen its outcome more so particularly applicable to India.
The COP26 outcome, specifically to India.
Yeah.
I have to say it's difficult to me because when I heard about India, I was quite impressed by also some incentives of the companies and so on, which was given by the government. But in essence, I don't have the experience. I don't know exactly the Indian market so well that I can comment in depth about what I would advise. I would say, overall, I think the main thing which has to happen is transparency. So that you as a company, but also in a certain area and on certain projects, that you show the path which you want to go and show particularly the milestones in the path. So that you say, well, we want to achieve this goal and we want to achieve it by taking these and these steps to have clear deliverables, to have clear benchmarks in between, and therefore that you can be monitored and kind of provide the transparency, and therefore can be then, as I said, be monitored and assessed and how you are doing. So I think that's important because, as I said, for the investors, they are coming from different angles. They are different at their starting point. But what they have to show is, well, okay, that's what we try to achieve. So let's assume, take a simple example. One of the investors says, well, I'm starting to integrate ESG first in my equity portfolio because that's very clear, I can have direct impact. Then I'm saying, then in 2 years' time, I want to have it on my fixed income portfolio. Then in, let's say, year 3, I want to include my real estate portfolio. And in my real estate portfolio, I want to do different steps. I want to do the first step, which is on new buildings. And I want to have a different path for the existing buildings, which I kind of upgrading and so on. So, but clearly to have this path and to have the milestones clear, I think would be quite important.
That's great, sir. In fact, sir, I have been in India's largest energy company, that's NTPC Limited, for more than 37 years. And NTPC, for its contributions and performance, is known world over. And we are, in fact, reporting integrated reports for last 3 years. Sustainability report for almost a decade. We started reporting 2011-12 sustainability reports and integrated for last 3 years. And as far as investment demands of NTPC in international markets goes, we always get more than 3 to 4 times response of whatsoever size we come for.
Wow.
So that way is doing wonderful. And as far as future plans are concerned, internationally, our Prime Minister has made commitment to add up 450 gigawatt of renewable energy. And as far as NTPC is concerned, is committed to add up 60 gigawatt. And there are a few more innovations which are done successfully by NTPC. They are now becoming a bit global in nature. We started experimenting floating solar systems somewhere 5 years back with 1 megawatt. Now, during these 5 years, it is scaled up to capacity of 100 megawatt. And it is going further. So, in addition to ground-mounted solar systems, now water surfaces are being exploited extensively. They help us in conserving water as well as generate additional energy because of solar systems remaining a bit cooler on water surfaces.
Wow,
So
excellent.
these advancements are quite coming handy. In addition, till now in India, there is no offshore wind farm, whereas in European countries, there are many. Now, we are coming up with, to begin with, thousands megawatt offshore wind farm in our Gujarat offshore. And India has the world's largest offshore capacity and potential, having 7,600 kilometers of coastal area. So we are working extensively in a focused way. And as organization, as well as a country as a whole, we are definitely sure that we will surpass 450 gigawatt much before the committed timelines.
Wow.
So I
Thank
thought
you.
let me share with you some of the facts.
Wow. Well, that's very, very impressive. Let me ask you, how are you sharing this information so that more people, first of all, are aware and maybe some others could follow your example, your leadership?
Sir, these informations are available in our integrated report. if you just Google for NTPC Limited integrated reporting or sustainability report, you will get the integrated entire document wherein all the details are there.
Okay, I will definitely do, yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Sushilji, for the question. And Dr. Engshuber, on behalf of IICSR, our team, all our students and all our viewers, we would like to thank you for taking time from your busy schedule and sharing your rich experience with all of us. If you wouldn't be there, I don't think so CSR, ESG, responsible investment would ever be there. It's because of
No.
your good karma that these things have happened, and we are all grateful and thankful for your presence and contribution.
Well, thank you so much, Harsha. It has been a pleasure, and I wish I would come to India pretty soon. And I would like to take some of your very positive examples, like the last one, which we just heard, and try how to best leverage it internationally. My daughter, as I said, she is the head of sustainability at one of the huge oil and utility companies. So I think I can learn a lot from the last speaker and bring it into their
Sushil,
thought
sir.
as well.
Yeah. Sir, in fact,
Sure.
100 megawatt solar system is in the commissioning phases, and by January, we will be having single location 100 megawatt solar floating system in operation.
Wow.
That will be the world largest
Excellent.
floating solar system.
Wonderful. That's very impressive, sir.
Thank you so much.
And if you visit India, sir, we will see that you are facilitated and you personally see the installation and functional aspects of the system. Harsha will network
No,
and we will make it happen.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Well, thank you
We
so
will
much.
facilitate all these, your visit to the NTPC plants.
Yes.
We'll facilitate that.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Sushil, sir. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much, Harsha. All the very best, all the good luck. If I can ever be of more help, feel free to reach out. You know how to get me. And I would be delighted to be in much closer contact and to support you much more going forward.
Thank you so very much, sir. We look forward to hosting you in our country as well when things are a little more normal for all we human beings.
Okay. Thank you so much and bless you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.